Hello, welcome to Vineyard KC West podcast. For more information, visit us at vineyardkcwest.com.
Yeah, so when you're a kid, things can be funny like that, right? And you remember that? You remember your 6-year-old self kind of process things differently, as far as work and things, and sometimes you want to go back there, right? Like you've ever had those days where there's too much adulting, right? Too much work and those things, and so, with kids you can view things that way, but very quickly, as adults we get to the point where it's, the work, can overwhelm us, where work is, seen as something totally different, whereas, kids, I remember like when my guys were little, they'd ask me, "What'd you do?" And I just did this, but to them, they're just so curious, right? And for us, it can be the things that stress us out. So there's job stress, right? Recent studies show that 75% of employees believe the worker has more on the job stress than a generation ago. 62% of employees now say that work-related stress leaves them overwhelmed and overtired. 25% of employees view their jobs as the number one stressor in their lives. And then job stress is more strongly associated with health complaints than financial or family problems. So the definition of job stress is this. It can be defined as the harmful physical and emotional responses that occur when the requirements of the job do not match the capabilities, resources, or needs of the worker. So we are in the fourth week of a series about margin. So how we can get margin back in our lives, steal it back from the margin monster in our time and our finances. So we're in week 4 with time. And so the first few weeks we looked at overcoming crowded loneliness, looking about changing things up so that we have meaningful relationships. The second week we looked at trying to dive into the rhythm of Jesus. He lived a certain way, and we wanted to dive into that. And then we looked at the Hebrew day planner about prioritizing relationships. That's what Jesus did. And then the next thing was rediscovering the convivium, which means feast or banquet. And we looked at using the tool of the table to be able to build a life of deep relationships. That's what we looked at last week. So this week we're going to look at getting work done at work. But more importantly, it really comes back to relationships again, about being really present with God and present with others at our jobs and in doing things differently. So, when you look at this definition, there's some pretty serious words here, right? Harmful physical and emotional responses, when the requirements of the job do not match the capabilities, resources, or needs of the worker. And then I would say, too, expectations, right? Expectations of the employer, expectations of the employee. And so you end up with something that, it can cause, different problems. So we can even think, too, that maybe work is the problem, right? It's like, look, work is the problem. The fact that, I have to work. And I will tell you, though, I've met a bunch of retired people and said, so how is it? How's the water? And here's the thing. They still work. They still do things. But what we need to know is that work is not the problem, because work was God's idea. So Genesis 2:15 says, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden, now wait for it, to work it and take care of it. So from the very beginning, God decided that people would work, that we would have an expression of working and doing things and in really co-creating with him. And so work isn't the problem, but finding our identity in our work is the problem that breeds stress. That's the problem right there, because Genesis 1:26, it says, then God said, let us make mankind in our image. Okay, so our identity is in God himself, that we would find our identity in relationship with him, that we would be with him and reflect him to other people. So in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the air, or birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along on the ground. And so this is a very early problem that we have of putting our identity into our work. It wasn't something that we created, so be okay. You didn't create this yesterday, or we didn't create the problem. Cain and Abel, the sons of Adam and Eve, they had a problem, and they worked, Abel was, he was a rancher per se. He dealt with livestock, and then Cain was a farmer with crops and fruit and vegetable and wheat and all kinds of stuff. And so it says that they brought their offering one day, and it says that Abel's sacrifice God showed favor upon, but then Cain's sacrifice God didn't show favor upon. And so one would have brought a sacrifice of an animal, it's a part of an animal in sacrifice to God, but then Cain he brought fruits, like some crops from the ground. So the problem wasn't the quality of what he brought, in essence, that it was animal versus crops. Both were appropriate, unless it was a sin offering, and then it had to do with blood. But that's not what it was for. What it had to do with Hebrews 11:4 tells us, the writer of Hebrews tells us, that by faith Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain. So their work lives and how they were living their lives flowed into their sacrifice. So when they brought their worship to God, how they were living flowed into what they did. So what Cain did is Cain brought like a dead religion sacrifice. So he wasn't living his life in a way of faith after God. He was identified in his work. He probably enjoyed what he did, but somehow God was not integrated into what he did on a daily basis. He kind of did that, and then there was this God thing over here. Whereas with Abel had integrated God into his life, into what he was doing, and so he was able by faith to do this, not just this moment, but with his life. And so what we're going to look at today is we're going to actually look at in Exodus 18. If you have a Bible, you can open there. Words will be up here as well, and some are on your outline. But we're going to look at Exodus 18 and verse 13 to 26. And we're going to take a look at Moses. And, Moses, he had a pretty serious job, you guys, right? He, not only that, he felt totally just not able to do anything, not able to help with anything. And, but then all of a sudden, God says, go do this, go rescue my people. And he's like, I can't do it. And God says, look, I'll be with you. And so he goes and he partners with God to rescue these people, just tons of people, millions of people. And then he gets them there. And then the problem is now he has to deal with them, right? Like Lord of the Rings, like, certain death, little chance of success. What are we waiting for? Let's go. That's what happened. And they're set free. But now he has to manage the people, maintain it. And so they're in the desert. They're hanging out. They're living life. Moses actually had sent his wife and kids back to be with his father-in-law. They were there. And there was a day, though, that the father-in-law said, hey, all right, they're free. They're living life. Let's go visit. Let's go have a visit. And so his father-in-law, Jethro, shows us 4 principles of work and life. Not this Jethro. Anybody know that one? Right? Beverly Hillbillies. If you haven't seen this, is it on Netflix or something? Maybe, I don't know. But Jethro from Beverly Hillbillies, right? So they packed up and went to Beverly. Man, that's good stuff. If you haven't seen it, you got to see it. So it's not this Jethro, but let's read together what happens when Jethro goes to work with Moses. The next day, Moses took his seat to serve as judge for the people, and they stood around him from morning till evening. When his father-in-law saw all that Moses was doing for the people, he said, "What is this you are doing for the people? Why do you alone sit as judge while all these people stand around you from morning till evening?" Moses answered him, "Because the people come to me to seek God's will. Whenever they have a dispute, it is brought to me, and I decide between the parties and inform them of God's decrees and instructions." And so we have a pretty serious job here for Moses, and you've got to realize that there was probably about 400,000 families. Okay, 400,000 families that Moses had to help with. And so the first principle that we're going to see is that we're going to see that we need to set achievable goals, right? Like, do you think it's achievable for Moses to care for 400,000 families? That's what he was doing, you guys. Like, literally, he was trying to do all of this himself. Like him making a to-do list probably wouldn't have helped, right? You may have heard that, like when you feel overwhelmed, no problem, just write a to-do list. The problem with a to-do list is that it's better than nothing, but it's kind of just all over the place, right? If it's just you just put down all these things you need to do. Typically what you'll do is you'll look through and you'll just choose the easiest things. Well, I feel like doing that, or I feel like doing that. But that has nothing to do with what's most important. And all of our work is significant. Everything you do, whether it's something that you like what you do for work today or it's something that you dislike, it's significant work because it's something that you do to help people, to help make people's lives better. If you work with a product or a service, or you teach, or you're in sales, you help people get products that they need, and all sorts of things that you do, it's significant. And so you have to set achievable goals, and if you don't set achievable goals with what you do, then it can overwhelm you. Life can be overwhelmed. And then what it does is it pushes into your family life, into your relationships, and then what happens is that you can't be present with the people that are most important. And then you're not resting. You're going, working more and more. That's what happens. So setting achievable goals. So if you think about 400,000 families, if you took 5 minutes a problem in a 12-hour day, that'd be 144 a day. So to get to all 400,000 families, it would take you 8 years. That's a huge to-do list, right? Just absolutely. So you ever try to make an appointment with somebody that is really important, and hey, I can meet with you 3 months from now, or 6 months from now, or next year, that sort of thing. But it's like 8 years. That's a little excessive, right? If you got your request in as the last request. So, but what Jethro was getting at with Moses, and the reason he asked the question, like, why are you doing this alone, is he's trying to get him to think differently and to prioritize. He's trying to get him to do something like this. There's different ways that it's put out there. There's must, should, could list. Okay, so must is mission critical, right? So that's the most important thing that you want to do. Should is important, okay? Could is nice to have, all right? This next one, believe it or not, is from my father-in-law, okay? So A, B, C, priority. He didn't think of it, but he applied it in his own life and then shared it with me. And so A, B, C priority list, okay? So A would be must do, critical to successful performance, important and urgent, high priority. B is should do, critical to success, performance, but can be temporarily postponed if necessary. It's important but not urgent, medium priority. And then C, it'd be nice to do, desirable but not critical to successful performance. Sometimes urgent but not important, low priority, right? And then this last one, if you want to break it down way on the bottom shelf to help you understand, A is for air, right? So without air, what happens? Okay? You're done, right? You need air. It's absolutely critical. Bread, like you can go for a bit without eating, okay? But you've got to eat at some point. And then C for chocolate, okay? So I don't know. That last one, you say, no, that's up at the front. But these are simple tools to do this, in your life and to take the list. And when we do this, there's different business books. One talks about like working in your business versus working on your business. So if you're a business owner or have tasks and whatever you do, what we can do is we can get so busy just doing things in our life and our business that we don't actually work on it. We don't get strategic. But when you pull away and do this sort of thing, you realize what's most important. What do I really need to do? And when you do that, you get clarity. And when you have clarity, you can succeed at the things you need to do. Because what Moses was doing is literally, you guys, he sat there and just hundreds of thousands of families came at him like a conveyor belt. And whatever was coming off that conveyor belt, that's what he took next. Just let me have it, right? Instead of prioritizing. And so we can feel like that too. And I'll tell you what, it's interesting. I didn't even catch this. I'm slow sometimes. But my father-in-law gave me the ABC priority list, and I'd seen other versions, but a year ago, we sat down, looked at some of this stuff, and then just this last week, because he was coming back to visit, okay, right? I said, you know what? I'm gonna really implement that. I've done a little bit, and so I sat down, and I didn't have 400,000 things, but I had 50 that were just knocking around in my head, and had on different pieces of paper and to-do lists all over the place. And so I put them down, and it was interesting. I had the most productive week that I've had in months, because I just walked through this ABC. And so not only was I able to figure out what was most important, but then I also, too, was able to accomplish more because I was focused. You see, because for me, you guys, like with what we have here, we've got a million things. Even though we're a smaller church, we've got a million things happening here. And so, as a small church pastor, I mean, part of it, it's just like, it's part of the deal, like all these things, and getting involved in all sorts of areas and finding the right people. But I mean, I know what my top priorities are. Like, if I do these things, I'm going to be healthy, you are going to be healthy, the community is going to be healthy. Like, what God wants to do in us and through us in this community will happen. The first thing is to be able to focus on preaching and teaching. That I have time to like sit down into what we're doing and communicating. Because what it is communicating Jesus clearly. Because if we can understand who Jesus is clearly, then we can respond to him as he is, and our lives will be changed and other people's will be changed. So that's why. The second thing is that I can spend time developing and meeting with leaders. So in other words, identifying leaders, helping them understand who they're made to be, and then helping put them into where they are in leadership in the church, in the community, and those things. And then the third thing is to be able to engage the community. Is that I'm engaging the different civil and other different groups within the community. If I'm able to do those things, then I'm healthy, I'm doing what I'm supposed to, our church is healthy, and then lastly, the community is going to be healthy. So the pressure is for me is some of those 50 things have nothing to do with those three things, right? And so, but just doing this exercise, it freed me up. And so I don't know if you feel the same. You may have it nailed today, but you may have a list. But I encourage you to do this. It made such a huge difference for me. So, with Moses, he probably had pressures on him. Like, he probably felt like he couldn't have anybody else do it. Why? Because he was the guy, right? Like, God said, hey, you're going to go down there, and I'll give you your brother to help you, but you're going to go down there, and you're going to rescue the people of Israel. So if people had needs, he wanted to shepherd them. He wanted to do well. And so as people had needs, he felt like, I can only answer them. I can only bring the decisions. And so we know Moses had woundedness in his life. We know he had brokenness. We know that he had problems. He maybe was leading out of the idea, kind of a little bit of Messiah complex, right? We know that he wasn't the Messiah. He had a job and those things, but he may too have been trying to prove himself, right? We see different times and decisions that he makes bad decisions. Great leader, but he makes bad decisions at certain points. Misrepresents God at certain points. And so he may have been kind of leading out of that. And so it's important that we don't take our woundedness and we don't take it into our lives and our work, and we make sure to separate our position as a child of God from our performance at work. And so what that has to do with is why do I do what I do? So I work hard so that, right? So what if we approached our work like I'm a child of God? That's my identity. My identity is not in my work, right? That doesn't define me. But sometimes we put different answers in here, like, and these aren't bad things, but if they're our main motivation, then we're never going to be truly satisfied. So I work hard so that I can have more money, right? That's not bad, but it's like, at what point? What point is it enough? What point, like, is it satisfied? And why do you want more money? Is it to keep up with the Joneses? Is it to have something that you don't need? Is it to buy something that's just going to keep you just spinning your wheels and never be able to relax and rest? Like, why do you work hard so that you can have more money? It's important to look at ourselves. I I work hard so that I don't fail, right? There's a fear of failure. I've failed like tons of times, even recently, and it's okay. The water's okay, and we're all going to fail at what we do. Typically, it's not whether we fail, it's how we recover. That's the true test of who you are. And so if you have this thing today that you're just like, man, I can't fail, I can't let anybody down, I can't do that, then I just want to set you free. You're going to fail. You're going to blow it. And that's not the true test of like your mettle. Like that's not your strength. Your true test is how you respond afterwards, like how you recover well. Maybe you work hard so that you can keep your job. That's a very real pressure. Maybe you've got a boss that you feel like they're gunning for you, or you've got other employees that are gunning for you, or it's just basically you've been told, look, unless you perform, you've got to do this. And so very real pressures. Maybe you work hard so that you can prove your worth, right? Maybe you had people in your life that really pushed on you, and unless you were in the top portion, or like if you got B pluses, that was never good enough. And so I've always got to keep going. Or maybe you won league, but you never won the championship for the whole county, and parents or other people, just coaches, just said it's not good enough. Maybe you're just trying to prove yourself over and again. Or maybe you want to keep ahead of expectations, unreasonable boss, that sort of thing. So our calling, our vocation, our calling is rooted in our relationship with God. So we, like in school, they talk about having vocational training. Okay, here's the problem, is that this has taught us that what we do is who we are, because we've called our work our vocation. The word vocation actually comes from a Latin word, vocare, and it means calling. And it means like not like your work, what you do, but like what you were made for. Like this is who I am. This is the stuff that God put in me to shine a light on the world. That's what vocation actually means. But we've made it like my job, my work. So my work is one way that I live out my vocation or calling. Like I've been a pastor since my early 20s. And so 20 plus years. And I've worked in churches as a pastor, but because we've planted churches or helped smaller churches get going and get healthy and things, I've had to be bivocational at times. And so my work as a pastor has not been different as what I've done bivocationally. And I did all kinds of stuff. When the economy was bad, I was a custodian at a school at night, so I could go do this during the day. I was a salesman for a sign company. I worked for Apple. I worked for a local retail company. I worked for a university as a rep. I did all these things. And I'll tell you what, in all of those different places that I did those things, I pastored people. Which my definition is that I facilitate life and ministry for people. In other words, I help them step into the life that God created them for, and then the ministry, in other words, the living out of what God created them for to other people. I've done that in all those places. So whether I work in a church or whether I work doing something else, I function within my calling. And so that's the key, is that we don't want to be identified by our work in those places. 1 Corinthians 10:31 says, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. So I don't call my work that I go down to at BPU or the fire department or police department or wherever I go, I don't call that secular and then call this sacred. I don't call what I do on Sunday here, if I'm one of you guys, sacred and then that secular. It's all sacred. Right? The whole earth is a blaze of God's glory. God is everywhere. And so everything that I do, he's present in those times. And so that's where we get into trouble, right? It's like I act one way here and I act another way there. So the next principle is consider the long-term consequences of your work pattern. Because, if you're driven today, and I'm driven, it's cool. If we could drive together sometime. I'm just like, I go, 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 go. Nothing wrong with that. But if we have a pattern that's unhealthy and we just go, 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 like Moses, like conveyor belt, just coming after me and not prioritizing, the hard thing is that I'm not doing my main things, right? See, sometimes we think that the way we get to success in what we're doing is by saying yes. But I think it was Warren Buffett that says, you succeed by saying no. Because when you say no, you prioritize what's most important in your life. And so, look what Moses' father-in-law says. He says, what you are doing is not good. You and these people who come to you will only wear yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone. Great advice. What you are doing is not good. So listen to the warning. Listen to the warning. And this is for life too. You may be handling things good at work, like it's set up a certain way that like the stress isn't there, but it could be at home. Because it's important that you prioritize in all those areas. The Mayo Clinic suggests we ask ourselves these questions if our stress is leading towards burnout, okay? So these are the questions that they say you should ask is, do you find yourself being more cynical, critical, and sarcastic at work? Have you lost the ability to experience joy? Have you become more irritable and less patient with coworkers, customers, or clients? And again, apply this to home too, because the same stress can rise at home. And what it means is that something's wrong. It means that you need help. Do you feel that you face insurmountable barriers at work? You feel that you'll never find the energy to be consistently productive or feel satisfaction from your achievements? Do you have a hard time laughing at yourself? Are you tired of your coworkers asking if you're okay? Do you feel disillusioned about your job? Do you drag yourself into work and have trouble getting started once you arrive? So if you answered yes to any of these at a certain point, it's kind of like, okay, where am I at? What place am I at? And there's all sorts of different ways that you can do things. The problem, though, you guys, is that, and again, stress itself isn't bad, but it's the meaning that we give to stress is what's bad. So what happens is like, so let's say you're just going, and you're just not slowing down, and then you're on your way to work, and then somebody cuts you off, and it's like you're here, and then you get into work, and something's wrong, you're here. And so our hearts and our stress levels are just high. They're meant to come down. They're meant to come down at some point. And the problem is that if we don't manage ourselves, if we don't consider the long-term consequences, then we crash. That's what burnout is. And ultimately, it's putting too much pressure on ourselves. Ultimately, I think it's rooted like in self-sufficiency, which, put another way, pride. Like, I got this, right? It starts at a young age, like little kids. Like, I would do something with my kids. I do, right? And then we grow up that way and just like, it's still, God's like, hey, let me help you. I do. Somebody else, let me help you. I do. And so it can end up taking over our lives. So what Jethro says is he says, hey, here's a different way to do your work. So change the way you work because, again, work's not the problem. It's good, you guys. Like when we work, we co-create with God. We care for other people. And work is good. But the meaning that we give to it changes everything. So work differently. So Exodus 18, 19 through 23 says this, listen now to me, and I will give you some advice. And may God be with you. You must be the people's representative before God and bring their disputes to him. In other words, you have to keep working. Okay? The work still has to happen. Teach them his decrees and instructions and show them the way they are to live and how they are to behave. Okay? But, okay, everything pivots on that. Select capable men from all the people, men who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials over hundreds, 50s, and 10s. Have them serve as judges for the people at all times, but have them bring every difficult case to you. The simple cases they can decide themselves. That will make your load lighter because they will share it with you. If you do this, and God so commands, you will be able to stand the strain, and all these people will go home satisfied. So look, he's saying, look, if you implement a prioritizing system, if you include others, not only is this going to be better for you, but it's going to be better for everybody. Because if you're a leader here, and you're pushing, whether you're leader of your home or whether you're leader of a workplace or those things, here's the thing. If you're stressed, everyone else is too. So there's some practical steps here that you walk through. And some of you may have applied these things in your life. You never knew, like, wow, this is in the Bible. This is called Jethro's Counsel, okay? And so it's so wise, so good. And somebody told me this 20 plus years ago, and I'm kind of starting to understand it, kind of starting to get it, right? You'll spend your whole life getting to know how you do that. So the work still needs to get done. Do it differently, okay? How can I do it differently? The next thing is define roles. Whether you're at work or whether you're at home, define roles. When Michelle and I got married, my wife, we went through premarital counseling. And so at premarital counseling, they give you tools, right? Because when you want to get married, you don't know what you don't know, and all sorts of things. So tools. And one of the key things they did was to define roles. And we really took that to heart. Who's going to do, the checkbook? Who's going to do the laundry? Who's going to cook? Who's going to do? Now, most of the things we do together. Who's going to shop? So at one point or another, we blur the lines. But where we get into arguments and trouble is where we realize our roles have gotten blurred, where it's like, who's doing what? Or one person is doing more and the other person's not contributing. And so it's defined roles. And typically not contributing is me, where it's like I'm like driving with ministry, work, that sort of thing, and then I'm not contributing there, right? And it comes down to defined roles. Know your gifts and competencies. In other words, if you're trying to accomplish things, whether at home or work, and I put you also here. One of my mentors, he has the little thing on his desk, you also. Why? If you're a leader or a boss or a manager, you can sit there and tell people what to do all day long. Well, you need to do this. You need to do this. But you also. In other words, you need to know your gifts and competencies. What are you good at? And what are you not good at? What are growth areas? How can you fill those in with other people? And then who's really good at something and fill those in. And then what you do is you organize and delegate work accordingly, at home or at work, to fit into those different areas. And what happens is when you do that, everyone finds margin and everyone goes there. So we've got the advice, right? But what does he do? Is Moses sharper than me? That my father-in-law brought me something a year ago. It took me a year before I really implemented it, right? He's here today, by the way. Wave, Larry. Hi, Larry. Yeah, there you go. So he didn't put me up this. I didn't even tell him. So organize and delegate work accordingly. So what did Moses do? Okay, this is what Moses did. Moses listened to his father-in-law and did everything he said. He chose capable men from all Israel and made them leaders of the people, officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Obviously, just to be clear, this is written in a very patriarchal time, and so everything started with men, and then that meant the whole family. And so today, obviously, it's men and women. So you'd choose capable men and women from all Israel, made them leaders of the people, officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. That's a system, right? You've got a system. This is how we do it. That's what's happening. They served as judges for the people at all times. The difficult cases they brought to Moses, but the simple ones they decided themselves. And so here's the key principles that you see that Moses did, is that listen, okay? So the way to listen to a sermon or a talk or anything, there's typically many things said, but there's usually like one thing that it's like, yeah, that's it. And if you're in a context like this, you're listening to where somebody's sharing out of the Word of God and teaching, what the Holy Spirit will do is that, like I said, there's many things said, but then there's something that's it, or it catches you differently. That's typically the thing for you to mesh with what God is doing in your life, or He's trying to whisper to you, like, hey, that's for you, okay? And typically it's not the voice of condemnation, like, you're bad. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that, like, hey, that's for you. That's helpful. So listen, like, today, what did you hear? Write down, like, this is what I heard today that I could change or implement. There's questions on the bottom to help you too. Decide on what you will change, right? So make a decision what you'll change. Because it may not be work, but it may be home, where you say to yourself, you know what? I really need to do things differently because my identity is in what I'm doing versus enjoying life and being present with God and other people. And then next, include others, right? Include other people in the process. And then empower other people in your life at home or work. Empower other people for what you do. And then lastly, execute on your plan. Here's the interesting thing. Everyone, whether their job or their work, and wants to do well. They want to be the best. They want to succeed. Here's the difference between people that succeed at their plan and those that don't. Here's the difference between companies that are the best companies in the world or ones that just struggle and never really make it. The only difference is execution. It's what it always is. Everyone has goals. Everyone tries to prioritize. Everyone tries to set things. But the people that succeed are the ones that execute. So the thing today that you need to listen on, execute it. Implement it into your life. Okay? So let's pray, and we're going to have the worship team come back up.
Thanks for listening this week. If you're looking for ways to serve, give, or get connected, please visit vineyardkcwest.com.